And I've since done that. And we were the first in Utah to elect a woman to the state Senate, to a state house, Martha Hughes Cannon. And it was the suffrage era. And we were ahead of the curve as a state. And interestingly, Mormon women were very vocal in establishing sort of Utah as a state and setting up sort of this initial territory to become a state, and were meeting in their kitchens to empower themselves as you saw change in that era. So that's exciting that we were the first. But then not much happened. We had a woman governor in the state of Utah, a Republican, but she was the lieutenant governor, never elected herself. She was part of a ticket, a man. He moved on to take a position, I believe if I remember correctly, in the Bush era. And she then, Olene Walker, became governor. But as she turned around to run for herself, the Republicans did not move her through their convention. So she was governor, but they, in their party, didn't trust her governance enough, even though she was highly popular. And she ended up losing to John Huntsman. So then John Huntsman became governor, and she never returned to political life. And so we had Olene Walker. And then I looked further, and my good friend in the 90s, when I was running the office of Congressman Bill Orton from Utah in D.C., my friend Jan Graham was elected Attorney General. And she actually was a neighbor of my parents and knew her well, and she was wonderful. She served for 2 terms as Attorney General in the 90s. That is the one and only woman that Utah has ever elected statewide, Jan Graham. She's also the last Democrat to be elected statewide. So that tells me Utahns will elect a Democrat again, and they're willing to consider a woman. So I reached out to Jan recently, and she fully supports my candidacy and is actually willing to help me out. So I'm very hopeful that we're at the point now that people will take a second look at this and go, yeah, the qualified woman, wouldn't it be great to have a Democrat in the delegation? We need one, and it's about time we elect another woman statewide, so Jan doesn't have to be alone in that very lonely club in the state.
You're also a mom. You have 2 sons. I also have 2 sons. And one of the things I've been sort of struggling with lately is how we raise children in this political environment. I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about, sort of being from a political family and raising sons yourself, a little bit about just sort of raising kids in this environment and raising them to be good people.
Yeah, well, one of the things that is very special about my childhood when I think about my father and the experience I had as a child of a politician and an elected official is that my dad was always friendly and kind, and he still is. And he was always willing to listen, and he was always willing to say, hey, let me understand your position. And he really does have a gift. And I'm going to get more to my children in a second, but I went to this breakfast this morning, and it was a more conservative audience. And as I walked in at 7:30, my wonderful staff was already there. And one of them turned to me and said, it's a very male-dominated room, Jenny. And I walked in the room, and it was literally 30 men, 3 women, if that, maybe even 40 men, 3 women. And it's interesting. They came up to me. I assume they're Republicans mainly. They came up to me, and the first thing I wanted to talk about was my father. And I think that is because he had a gift to be kind and to be very respectful, and my mother as well. So I feel like I had that as a framework for my own ethics, and I hope I'm teaching that to my children. I will say, as a woman, I think I have a little different style than my father, and I've had to fight harder. So I'm probably a little, at times, frankly, a little more flippant, a little more, hey, we're going to do it this way. And my dad is always, the Jiminy Cricket on my shoulder, trying to kind of balance me back a little bit. And I think I've found the right spirit to being competent, working hard at policy, I mean, when I was first elected as a woman to the county council, 8 guys and me, I felt like I had to be the smartest person in the room. So I worked very hard. And I think that served me because I love policy. And I've become, I'm very good at it. So that has allowed me with confidence to go into this campaign, even facing a Mitt Romney, say, wait a minute, I know how to get that done. And I think back to your question about my kids, and I think this would be true if I had daughters. I just happen to have 2 boys, 16 and 13 years old. And I think they're learning by the conversations at the dinner table. I don't force my kids to come to the parades or campaign with me. I welcome them. I invite them. If they say no, they want to hang with their friends or they have something to do, that's what they do with their dad or with a friend. Or they're old enough now to even spend some time on their own. And so I feel like they're getting the best of both worlds. And when I was so happy when my kids, my husband and I, in previous years have dropped them at school, but they take the school bus home because we're working parents. And I loved that my son in the year 16 was debating on the school bus like Hillary versus Bernie. And he was sharing, which kids were on which side. And I hope that it was pleasant because that debate was not always pleasant. But at the same time, these kids were engaged and the kids on the school bus, the teenagers were having these conversations. So I like that I've offered that to my children, this additional education in government. And I think what I try to do is live my life, include them in what I'm doing at the level they're interested, and hope for the best.
I love that. My kids are picking this stuff up at the dinner table too. They're much younger. They're 6 and 4, but they're frequently talking politics in a way they may not completely understand, but
yeah. And I'll be honest, one of my 2 is far more interested than the other, the older. And we'll see if the 13-year-old becomes interested. He just wanted, I'll be honest, my one said, well, Mom, he said, do we have to be on TV? When I told him, we worked through as a family this decision, and then I ultimately said, okay, I'm going to do it. And he said, do I have, and I said, no. Maybe election night, but I won't, you don't have to do the commercials and all the fun stuff. And he said, okay. And then he said, Mom, do you think I could meet an NBA player if you win? That's where his mind is. He thinks any level of, public quote unquote fame might result in a hello at a NBA basketball game or something. So given we have the Utah Jazz, I might be able to pull that off if it happens. In fact, I might be able to pull that off either way.
If there's any Utah Jazz players listening, on the very, very off chance.
Yes, Max Rahovic is waiting for a hello.
All right. Well, is there anything else that you would like to make sure that we talk about?
I think if I had anything to add maybe to your listeners, it's that don't write off red states. We need the investment. It is more of a battle here. Our Democratic funding base is much more limited than a non-red state or a swing state. But we have so many great candidates here. We have a constituency ready to listen, learn, grow, change. And I am absolutely convinced that my kids are going to live in a very different climate, that we can become a purple state, and that, that's the world I live in as a county council member. 5 Republicans, 4 Democrats. When I go to county council today, we're going to figure out how to get things done. And we're wanting our federal government to do that. And I think that, being purple in Utah wouldn't be such a bad thing.
I love it. And I am super excited. We're going to be watching your campaign very closely for the next, 70-something days. And I can't believe it's that soon.
I know. Crazy.
And it's going to be one of the races that I'm most excited about on November 6th. If our listeners would like to help out your campaign, how can they do that?
Our website is wilsonforsenate.com. And of course, we've got a ton of information on the site and a donation link. If anyone has a buck or two that can send it to Utah, I would be more than grateful.
Excellent. And we'll put a link for that up on our website as well. So, Jenny, thank you so much for talking to me. This has been really fun, and I'm just so excited about your campaign.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you including me, and best of luck as we count down the last couple of months here.
All right. You too.
Thanks for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Wethlin and was created for use by this podcast.